Well, very early good morning to you. And just get my camera straight. Very early good morning to you. It's about 5 a.m. I think, maybe just after. One of the things that happens when you pursue a spiritual unraveling or a spiritual re-education is that your cycles get thrown into disarray. It's not that it's really disarray, it's more into a more beneficial kind of association, although to a mind that is hell-bent on trying to maintain the status quo of temporal living, it's going to be very disconcerting, I suppose. But as with all things, acceptance allows that disconcertation to pass and peace to prevail in the place where purpose actually comes to predominance in your life. So there are many things that happen, many things that occur. If you're using the workbook lessons of the course, you'll notice you go through many shifts in consciousness, many changes. And preferably those things happen hard and fast at the beginning. It's better not to try and drag out your shifts in consciousness because you want to be able to see them in rapid succession so that you can come to the conclusions that, yes, the changes that are occurring to you are actually real, rather than being happen chance things that over a period of years might seem to stretch out to be just like, oh yeah, well I had it, that was a coincidence, or that was something, you know. So with everything, with every opportunity to change comes the anxiety or the trepidation associated with letting go of the old way of dealing with things, the old way of looking at things. And in spiritual terms, when we talk about change, we're talking about taking a step into the unknown, allowing something else to occur which we have no control over. And even just that premise can seem quite daunting to someone who perhaps is looking at this for the first time or is quite new to the idea of change as being helpful. The tendency for the mind to want to cling to the status quo of things is generally quite strong because the mind doesn't naturally associate change with being helpful. The mind associates change with terror, given that the very, very first, and we're talking pre-manifestation here, the very first experience of change was the experience of separation from source, separation from God, which occurred or never really occurred. I mean, if you look at the idea this is a dream and it's all just imagination, but occurred in the dreaming mind or the sleeping mind, which has remembered not to laugh, before the world began. And when I say things like that, there's obviously the necessity to take on board greater parameters than just this physical nature of life that we consider ourselves to be experiencing here on earth. We have to get into the big picture, the really, really big picture, where what came before the earth, what came before time is and after time ended, the Alpha and the Omega. If we are truly eternal beings, then we exist, or we find ourselves to be self-aware long before the physical nature of life, this physical universe, was set up in order for us to be able to undergo this transformative process and bring our minds to a state of perfect stillness where the illumination of consciousness can occur and the remembrance of reality, which is eternal, can come again to take the place of doubt and ignorance and all of that sort of stuff, which is the remembrance of truth. The truth that you are eternal, that you are sinless, that you have never done anything wrong, that whatever occurs in a dream, no matter whether you want to call it good or bad, it is still just that, a dream. But we have these changes and shifts to go through on the way, let's call it on the path, on the road, which are instantaneous shifts, instantaneous changes in the conscious way we view ourselves, which are brought on by realizing not only where it is that we are attempting to maintain the status quo, right, which is going to become more obvious because we're becoming more aware of our triggers and our blocks, which are all things that are attempting to maintain the status quo of separation from source. But going to become more obvious because we're feeling the disturbance to our peace of mind. We are feeling not at ease, not peaceful within. There is some kind of anxiety, and all anxiety is existential. Who am I? Where am I? What's the point of my life here? Why am I here? Do I really have a purpose? All of that sort of stuff. That brings up a great lot of anxiety in many of the separated ones, and those who don't feel it are simply those who have not had many laps around the sun here yet, perhaps on their first or second incarnations. But those of us who've been here a while, we're sort of born into the continuum or into the experience with the dread of, oh no, not this again. Which I often joke is why babies cry so much in their cot. They don't really want a boobie or a nappy change. They're just frustrated. So, of course, as we grow up and our frustration becomes more apparent at the situation we find ourselves in, kookaburras are telling me it's time to get up and start making a video. As it becomes more obvious how frustrating life can be here and how much our own inner angst, our own inner existential situation is pushing on us for a result, is pressing us to change. We are brought into direct contrast, or into, not contrast, we're brought into direct confrontation with that anxiety. And I always refer to that anxiety as having a threshold, because we're on cycles here, and I'll just briefly explain that. Our cycles, which are determined or identified, probably a better word, identified, our cycles which are identified by the recognition of our triggers and our blocks and things like that, our grievances, our judgments, if they are obvious enough for us to identify them. Our cycles are things that repeat. They are lessons in letting go. They are opportunities to change, and they come around again and again and again. So you might find in a situation, let's say with a certain person or situation or event, you'll be like, oh, not this again. And you'll have a trigger there, right? That trigger is an opportunity to step back and to let go of the familiar responses to that particular situation and allow something of the unknown to occur, something from not our own repertoire of responses to take place. And that's going to cause this uncomfortable moment, or this pregnant pause, or this kind of like moment where the existential emptiness, let's say, of that empty space becomes apparent to you. Because if perhaps it was a situation that might trigger you to anger, then that anger is going to be in you wanting to come up and like tell that person to F off or whatever it is. And here's me telling you, don't do that. Don't respond in the same way. Let something else occur. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that anger isn't still in there wanting to come up. It is, right? Thoughts don't leave the mind that thinks them, right? And all your emotional responses to your thinking are simply that, the effects of your own internal dialogue. So acknowledging, yes, I'm feeling this trigger and it's causing me to want to be angry because I'm reacting to my thoughts in a way that's not peaceful, etc. But I want something else to happen, is going to necessitate, firstly, the letting go of all that angst, the letting go of all that familiarity of response, so that something else can happen. And so there's going to be a moment, and this is probably something better done in the privacy of your own home through prayer and meditation, but letting go of that trigger, letting go of the associations of that trigger, which also embodies all of the emotional response around it. And you might find you'll feel that energy coming up, and at first you want to label it anger or you want to label it whatever, but try not to label it. Just see it as energy. Let it come up and breathe, and you'll feel it kind of get stuck in your throat or here in your chest, or you might feel it in your gut, like at night when there's a bump in the night and you feel that fear in your belly, you know. But you'll feel it. You'll feel this kind of like emerging kind of, and it wants to come up, and you'll feel it kind of chokes you. And how do I even get this out? How do I get rid of all this energy, this emotional energy? And that's where you need to pray. It's like I need to ask the Holy Spirit for help with that, for help to do that, and be still and let it actually happen. Let it actually be released, no matter what that looks like. And I remember one of my earlier experiences in that was I'd been asking for help to release a particular energetic package that I'd found unhelpful, and the occurrence of it took place in the supermarket while I was standing looking at the baked beans, trying to choose between ham sauce and regular sauce or whatever. But and I started laughing and crying and having this incredible sort of spontaneous emotional without training I would have called it a meltdown. I had this kind of moment there where I was wailing, and I had to go outside. But it was good. I'd recognised that it was emotion coming up. I'd been in the process of mind training and instructing myself about what the potential or what the possibility of things would occur with things, with the release. And so I knew not to adjust. And I remember making a decision to just simply hold on to my trolley and let this happen, because I'd been wanting it to happen for ages. I've been wanting all this energy out. I've been wanting all this way of seeing the world and way of interacting with people and situations. I wanted something different to occur. And looking back now, I can't remember what the polarities were there with wanting those differences for, but anyway, that release happened, and there was a lot of tears and a lot of laughing afterwards. Actually, the crying went from crying and the release part of it to giggling and laughing, and that's always an indication of the Holy Spirit kind of like gliding in there and just flipping everything over. But that's my process, and I've grown to know that I can trust it implicitly throughout whatever the emotional state seems to be. No matter how dire it seems to be or how pressing it seems to be, I can trust it. And we have this sort of little saying that gets around in spiritual groups, trust the process, and that's exactly what that means. You have to connect with your higher power, your higher healer, your inner sense of self, your higher mind, whatever you want to call it. And it's hard to know what to call it. I like to call it the Holy Spirit. I know that carries religious connotations for a lot of people, but what the hell? It's like, am I sitting in church now? No, this is my church. I am the church. The altar is my heart space, and I'm taking to task my mind that believes I'm a body in light of the experience I've had that has shown me, no, I'm not the body. I am in fact the spirit. I am the mind. But of course, not just the mind, limited to this conscious bandwidth of self that has the see, hear, smell, touch, taste receivers and all that sort of thing. So my mind is now in the process of opening out to a greater awareness of self, as I said before, of that self that existed before time began and after it ends, right? the spiritual self, the ghost in the shell. Great movie if you've never seen it, The Ghost in the Shell. Actually, I actually like the manga better, which it is based on, the anime series or movie. So those thresholds, we have a threshold. So when I'm standing there in the supermarket pushing my trolley looking at the beans, there's a threshold. I can feel this emotional energy stirring and wanting to come up and do something with it. And it's easy, it's easy to want to just get a drink, have some alcohol, try and numb it and push it back down again. And it's not always so easy to, I'm sitting I have a Balinese style hut thing here, and there's an African mask, a hand-carved African mask on one of the posts over there, and I have two little microbats, they're about this big, that have taken to living. The mouth of the mask is open like that, and they fly up inside and they sleep there during the day, and I'm disturbing their access, so I'll try to wrap this up. The sun's coming up and they want to get some shut-eye. But you can feel this anxiety coming up, and it makes you want to adjust, right? So the natural tendency, if the mind is not trained enough, it will adjust to its anxiety rather than go through an internal shift in consciousness. So you'll find, and this can take on behavior to the extreme. You'll find that you'll move town, you'll even move country, to avoid looking at the looming and arising emotional package of energy that represents the nature of a quantum shift. And when I talk about a quantum shift, I mean a shift in consciousness that can't be undone. We often have, in life, many changes of mind about things on a particular horizontal level, on a linear level, where we'll say, oh yeah, I was wrong about that and blah, blah, blah. But when we're talking about spiritual work, we're talking about a vertical shift. We're talking about a shift away from the physical nature of life altogether, which can be very daunting, as I said before, because our very first experience of change was one of coming from the formlessness of the eternal realm into a place where we were, and still are, a stranger in a strange land. And it's terrifying, much like a little child being lost in a supermarket from its parent, and there are rows and rows of things, and where is my mother? And it's that anxiety comes up, and it's horrific. Right now, in A Course in Miracles, Jesus talks about it as a tiny moment of terror, which, tongue-in-cheek here, that's an understatement. Having had my illumination or my enlightenment of my mind through the dark night of the soul, that tiny moment of terror was absolutely sheer and absolutely all-pervading in its proportions. I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. But with the advent of A Course in Miracles, we learn to confront that moment of terror incrementally through ongoing changes in our perspective, which tends to be more like chipping away at the iceberg rather than confronting the whole iceberg all in one go, which is what happens when you undergo the dark night of the soul. In the dark night of the soul, though, you don't have anywhere to go. You realize that you can't adjust. All the alcohol in the world isn't going to help you, and doesn't matter how bombed out of your head you get. It's happening whether you like it or not. It's a complete emotional meltdown, surrender, and everything. And I think if you didn't have some kind of deep level of spiritual connectivity with your world and your purpose, you would probably submit to suicide in that moment. And in fact, for me also, I was recognizably within my own sense of myself, I was completely suicidal in that moment that it occurred to me. But because of my previous efforts at meditation, prayer, and finding God and all that sort of stuff, I had a sense that I had a choice, and I chose to pray rather than destroy the vessel. And I was rewarded in that, I guess. I don't know if rewarded is the right word, but I was led then to cut myself or something. Led then to my avatar, I should say, not myself. I was led then to the illumination of my mind through hearing a voice from the sky, etc. Believe that or not, I mean, I don't expect anyone to believe that until it actually happens to you. It's just some crazy old coot in the country telling a story, which is how I would see it as well. So the emotionality that comes up, this is what I really want to focus on in this video, and we're 20 minutes in, so I want to try and wrap it up for the ease of uploading this to YouTube, which seems to take 2 days on my phone to upload something. I have very little Wi-Fi out here in the country, and for the bats, of course, to be able to get to their bed. The emotionality that comes up, the natural tendency of the mind is to recoil from it. We don't like all that emotional terror. We don't like all that upwelling of anxiety. It's horrific, and we will do anything to adjust from it. We will just absolutely run to the ends of the earth, start a new relationship, go to a new country, start a new job, sedate ourselves with all manner of things to avoid it, which is why training the mind not to adjust, training the mind not to run away, not to look for an alternate reality, you know, that sort of thing, is important. It's like, you can do this, you can face it, you can be still, and by the grace of God, you will. And all you need to do is develop that relationship with your own internal guide, the Holy Spirit. It's like, Father, bring the Holy Spirit down to me. I give you my life and my will to guide today, and I would do only that which you would have me do, and nothing else do I will to do. Right? In that is the stage set for the doing of God's will, which is the reinstatement of your perfect happiness and the sense of peace that you are entitled to as a child of God. Be still. Let it happen. Undergo the devastation of whatever that emotional package is that's coming up for a moment, based on the level of response you have with the trigger in that cycle you're in, right? And allow yourself to simply undergo that chipping away process at that iceberg of terror to whatever degree you can. Be still. Draw your circle, let's say. Draw a circle around you on the ground, in the sand, in your consciousness. Imagine a circle, and you are refusing to step out of it. You're going to sit there within that circle or stand in that circle and simply breathe in the state of surrender. Here I am, Lord. I'm willing, I'm willing, I'm willing. And without any idea of how that willingness ought to look, whether you start crying or whether you start laughing, which is delicious, whether you start wanting to vomit, all sorts of things, right? There's no right or wrong in this. There's no way it should look or shouldn't look. And that goes for your transformation across the board. There are no rules. There's no right or wrong. You're free. And the acceptance of your freedom, the acceptance of your liberty as God created you, is something the world cannot deny you, because the kingdom of heaven is within you. And your meditative efforts are solely designed to take you within to that place in you where you come up against the threshold of your consciousness, which we call the veil, and allow what's beyond the veil to become apparent to you. Now, you may believe there's nothing in your mind other than the thoughts you seem to think, or perhaps a moment of stillness and silence if you can find it there. But I'm telling you that once you find that stillness and silence, and once you become the master of your mind and are able to maintain that stillness and that silence within you, that something else can happen, again, not of your own making, that will allow you and propel you, in fact, with this incredible sort of whoosh beyond the threshold or beyond the limit of your conscious sense of self into another whole, what would I call it, another whole dimension or interdimension or multiversal kind of experience of yourself that has nothing to do with the world or your body at all. You will still be you just won't have the use of this for a second. You can call that an out-of-body experience if you want, or you can call that a no-body experience if you want, which I prefer. But the way of its manifestation is to do the work and trust the process. Right? Doing the work is forgiveness, is the release, is the letting go, and trusting the process is the being still and allowing it to actually happen without deciding how you think that should look or what you want it to look like. Just trust, have faith. So be still, watch for your triggers. Watch for your triggers because your triggers. Watch for your triggers because your triggers identify your cycle, right? You'll find that in every relationship that you're in, with your spouse, with your work, with your hobbies, with your whatever, there's going to be a trigger there. There's going to be something that's like, ugh. Even the slightest little disturbance of a slight sigh, Jesus says in A Course in Miracles, right, belies your cycle. It belies the opportunity for change, for healing. And that's what we're about in our spiritual journey, is healing. We are healers and physician. Heal thyself. There's no one else out there to heal. My videos and everything that I do, and I'm winding down with all of this now, as according to instruction that I seem to be receiving and seems to be the vibe generally, which I've been tuning into and listening to. Everything that I do is simply a declaration of the certainty of my mind based on an experience of true self that I've had that had nothing to do with my body or this universe, this physical world, which then puts out a vibration into the dreaming or into the matrix, if you like, at large, helping in the process of raising that vibration of peace and love through the action of forgiveness, that anyone who's within earshot and anyone who has ears to hear can hear, and join in the singular nature of saying yes to that, and accept then their place in atonement in doing that, in answering the call, without choosing for themselves how they want that to look. Right? The time of adjusting to our pain and our suffering is done. The time of running away from our fears, running away from the problems that we think we have in the world is done. Remember that the greatest thing that the body only offered you anyway was the ability to die, the ability to lay it aside and come back around for reincarnation again and again and again, until finally the illumination of the mind reminds you of what your purpose is. And so when you enter into that laying aside the next time around, you'll be able to make a new choice outside of the Alpha and the Omega about the direction you're headed, and simply continue onward in the journey of the soul without having to come back here thinking there's anything here you missed. There isn't. The world is the world. It will always be the world, and it will always represent death and the attempt to usurp the throne of creation. So let's use it for a new purpose now and confront our fear, because love is letting go of that fear. Let's clear out all the fear out of our consciousness and out of our thinking, so that we respond only with love and only with peace in the situations where anger wants to tempt us to respond differently, and perpetuate the cycle of unlearning again and again and again, having trigger after trigger after trigger. Right? Done with that. Done with that. No more triggers. Let's just forgive, because we have a higher purpose now. We're not here to satisfy any worldly goals anymore, or to be comfortable in the world anymore, or to be concerned about our bodies anymore, all that sort of thing. It's time to wake up. It's time to awaken. I love you. I hope this video has been helpful. And I love the posts and videos that people send me and tag me in as well, because they're all reminders. They're reminders of my purpose. They're reminders of awakening. Thank you.